By early 1863, the American Civil War had entered a new phase. The Union, determined to break the Confederacy's hold on the Mississippi River, turned its attention to the fortress city of Vicksburg, Mississippi. Perched high on the bluffs, Vicksburg was the last major Confederate stronghold along the river, a vital link between the eastern and western halves of the Confederacy. Control of the Mississippi meant cutting off Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas from the rest of the South, dealing a devastating blow to Confederate logistics, reinforcements, and supplies. The fate of a war in the Western theater now centered on this one city. General Ulysses S. Grant, leading the Union forces, knew that Vicksburg had to fall if the North was to secure total dominance of the Mississippi River. But taking the city would not be easy. The Confederate commander, Lieutenant General John C. Pemberton, had fortified Vicksburg's defenses, making it one of the most heavily protected positions in the South. To capture it, Grant would have to orchestrate one of the most complex and daring campaigns of the war. For months, Grant attempted various maneuvers to get his army into position. The swamps and bayous of the Mississippi Delta made movement difficult, forcing him to try multiple approaches. He launched canal-building projects, attempted flanking movements, and even considered cutting a new channel through the river itself to bypass the Confederate stronghold. Each attempt met with failure. The terrain was unforgiving, the Confederates relentless. Disease spread through Union camps, slowing progress and demoralizing troops. But Grant was not a man to retreat or abandon his objectives. Then, in April 1863, Grant devised a bold new strategy. Instead of attacking Vicksburg directly, he decided to march his army south along the western bank of the Mississippi, cross the river below Vicksburg, and attack from the east. This move required extraordinary coordination, but Grant was confident in his men. Under the cover of darkness, Union Admiral David Dixon Porter led a fleet of ironclads and transports past Vicksburg's artillery batteries, dodging heavy Confederate fire to ferry Grant's army across the river. Explosions lit up the night as Confederate cannons roared, sending shells crashing into the water. Yet despite the risk, most of the Union fleet successfully navigated past the defenses. The daring maneuver was a success. Once across, Grant moved quickly, launching a series of brilliant lightning-fast battles to cut off Confederate reinforcements. In the span of just 17 days, Grant's army marched nearly 200 miles, fighting and winning 5 major battles, including Raymond, Jackson, and Champion Hill. These victories shattered Pemberton's hopes of receiving reinforcements from the east. The Confederate army in Vicksburg was now isolated and surrounded, with no way to escape or receive supplies. Grant then turned west toward Vicksburg itself, trapping the Confederate army inside the city. By May 18, 1863, the siege had begun. Grant's forces surrounded Vicksburg, cutting off all supply lines. Inside the city, nearly 30,000 Confederate troops and civilians endured relentless bombardment. Union artillery and naval gunboats pounded Vicksburg day and night, reducing homes and fortifications to rubble. Thousands of shells rained down upon the city, creating a nightmare for those trapped inside. Food supplies dwindled. Civilians and soldiers alike were forced to survive on meager rations, eating mules, dogs, and even rats as starvation set in. Disease spread rapidly through the city's confined quarters, killing as many as enemy bullets. Grant launched 2 major assaults on the city, hoping to break Confederate resistance quickly. But Vicksburg's defenses held firm. The Union suffered heavy casualties, forcing Grant to change tactics. Rather than risking more frontal attacks, he opted for a prolonged siege, starving the defenders into submission. Trenches were dug closer and closer to the Confederate lines as Union forces tightened their grip on the city. Sappers tunneled beneath enemy fortifications, setting explosive charges to weaken key positions. The Union Army, determined to break the city, waited for the inevitable surrender. Inside Vicksburg, morale plummeted. Civilians took refuge in caves dug into the hillsides, seeking shelter from the relentless shelling. Entire families lived in dark, humid underground tunnels, listening to the deafening roar of explosions above. Confederate soldiers, exhausted and malnourished, continued to hold their positions, but their strength was failing. Pemberton, realizing that no reinforcements would come, faced an impossible choice: surrender or watch his army wither away. On July 4, 1863, after 47 days under siege, Pemberton surrendered Vicksburg to Grant. The timing was remarkable, just a day after the Union's victory at Gettysburg in the Eastern Theater. The surrender of Vicksburg, combined with Gettysburg, marked a major turning point in the Civil War. The Union had complete control of the Mississippi River, effectively splitting the Confederacy in two. The war in the West was all but won. For the first time, the South faced a grim reality. Defeat was becoming more than just a possibility. It was now a looming certainty. For Grant, the victory cemented his reputation as the Union's most capable general. His success at Vicksburg would eventually lead to his promotion as General-in-Chief of the Union armies, paving the way for his future campaigns against Robert E. Lee in Virginia. His ability to outmaneuver, outthink, and outlast his enemies made him Lincoln's greatest asset in the war's final years. For the Confederacy, the fall of Vicksburg was a devastating blow. Southern leaders had long considered the Mississippi River vital to their survival, and its loss meant severed supply lines, weakened morale, and a near impossible road to victory. Confederate President Jefferson Davis called Vicksburg the nail that holds the South's two halves together, and now that nail had been removed. Southern morale took a severe hit. Many Confederate soldiers, knowing their families were suffering under Union control, began deserting in growing numbers. The war was far from over, but with the Mississippi under Union control, the South was now fighting with its back against the wall. The momentum had shifted. The tide of war had turned. The Confederate forces now faced increased desertions, dwindling supplies, and a growing sense of inevitable defeat. Grant's campaign had shown the power of strategic endurance and relentless pressure. The Union had demonstrated that it would not stop until the Confederacy was completely dismantled. In the next episode, we turn our attention to the Eastern Theater, where General Robert E. Lee launches his second invasion of the North, culminating in